Our first spine-tingling tale is for parents. Hey parents, if you're planning on letting your kids go trick-or-treating this year, how fucking dare you? Haven't you been reading the Facebook? Don't you know how reckless you're being? Well, it's time to break your teeth on this Charleston chew of truth. This Snarleston truth, if you will. I will. And did. And recognize the danger you are subjecting your children to. Parents, if you can even call yourself that. See, had you bothered to drag your neglectful peepers across the fear hog this October, you would have seen the horrible news stories being shared about trick-or-treaters receiving tainted Halloween candy from big jerks seeking to murder the world's children, which, in fairness, is just how some people celebrate Halloween. You'd have seen the familiar cautionary tales warning of candy filled with cyanide, or bleach, or razor blades, or smaller, secondary pieces of candy, creating a hostile flavor pairing that will scar your children for the rest of their tiny lives. But in recent years, roughly around the time certain states began legalizing a certain marijuana, those stories have taken on their most blood-curdling twist yet. People have begun handing out cannabis-infused candy as Halloween treats, of the trick-or variety, getting unsuspecting kids blazed from the comfort of their own porch. These lazy, diabolical stoners are dosing sweet innocent Hulks and Captains America, whose only crime was wanting to chase the crystal dragon of a kaleidoscopic sugar high. How could they do such a thing? Seems unrealistic? Maybe fake? Oh, yeah, obviously, They wouldn't do that. Nobody would. Not even the most beriddled agent of chaos wearing a homemade Joker costume, even though they've never heard of the Joker or Batman. That's fucked up. Is going to give away their weed for the sake of a prank they won't even get to witness. Weed that averages anywhere from $20 to $40 for a package of like 10 pieces, none of which is individually wrapped, meaning they've got to wrap it too? They'd have to buy a couple $100s worth of candy, individually wrap it, and then hand that out. Are you also concerned about strangers slipping $5 bills in there amongst the Zagnuts and Laffy Taffies? Because that's actually way more likely to happen, if for no other reason than it's easier than buying a bunch of weed, and with bucks, you can buy candy. But there seems to be some misconception among the people sharing these stories that dangerous hopheads sit around shoveling edibles into their mouths like candy corn, just popping one blazing blue raspberry gummy snail after another. If you're in the middle of a righteous snail bender, why wouldn't you plop a few down on some twerpy trick-or-treaters for grins and gigs? If you've ever taken an edible before, you know this is tragically not the case. A single dose is usually enough to get you so high you start inventing intangible concepts like math or Jaden Smith. It's some real bullshit. Also, edibles don't particularly taste good. To be honest, they kind of taste like weed. They're the shittiest type of candy, except for the whole getting high part, which kicks ass. They're closer to flavored vitamins, things you eat to fulfill an extremely utilitarian purpose, such as getting high, or going to sleep, or recording Let It Be. And so edibles aren't exactly a party drug the way passing around a joint is. None of this is to say that weed candy isn't a problem for kids, though. There absolutely have been cases of kids being taken to the emergency room after ingesting cannabis-infused sweets, and it absolutely is a growing problem since marijuana legalization. But in every reported instance, the candy was eaten accidentally, and wasn't handed out by some stranger on Halloween. It's almost always a case of parents leaving their edibles out and their kids finding them and scarfing them down, because that's what you do with loose candy. You suck that shit up like a dustbuster. And while the effects aren't fatal, like, say, leaving your gun around, there aren't a lot of studies on how leaving the weed sugar around might mess up a kid in the long term. And maybe we should make the packages look less like candy and be harder to open. And as one parent who dealt with this points out, make it federally legal so we can regulate such changes and do more studies on it. So, where did this spooky story come from? Well, this usually starts at the local level, with police stations putting out half-assed warnings and local news stories slurping them up before snowballing them to social media. But let's be honest, specifically the Facebook, the preferred platform for distributing fear-mongering memes designed to maximize our dread over imaginary threats. According to a Pew Research poll conducted in 2020, 53% of Americans get at least some of their news from social media. And one piece of news they definitely got was a 2019 Facebook post from the Johnstown, Pennsylvania Police Department announcing the seizure of 60 pounds of marijuana and cannabis-infused Nerds ropes while serving a warrant. The post urged parents to be vigilant in checking their children's Halloween candy for similarly tainted sweets, even though the Nerds ropes were affixed with labels clearly indicating their THC content. And nothing about the bust suggested the candy was intended to be distributed to trick-or-treaters. I mean, Nerds ropes is only number 60 on the top 100 Halloween candy by Dr. Anna Magis on listchallenges.com. So, it seems more likely that the people who bothered to sit down and make those labels probably intended to sell the Nerds ropes to other adults, judging by the fact that the labels specifically warned that the candy should be kept out of reach of children, and then they were found alongside 60 pounds of weed. You know who keeps 60 pounds of weed on hand? Drug dealers. And do you know who doesn't give boutique pot candy away for free? Also drug dealers. Media outlets around the country were only too happy to pick up the Nerds rope saga, using it to start a half-assed conversation about weed candy and trick-or-treaters. Even though, as I mentioned, the candy wasn't actually given to any trick-or-treaters, nor was there any evidence to suggest that was the candy's intended purpose. In fact, there was a good deal of evidence to the contrary. And while Facebook and social media have absolutely made this all worse, what's really remarkable is how the media has been doing this for longer than both the internet and legal weed have existed. The myth of random people poisoning Halloween candy to hurt children has been pushed by the media for decades, despite it going against one of the fundamental things we know about child predators, specifically that they are far more likely to be related to the victim than some rando. And so, of course, the only genuine incident of a child being killed by tampered Halloween candy occurred back in the 1970s, and the murderer wasn't a random stranger, it was the kid's father, who had injected a pixie stick with cyanide to collect on a life insurance policy, and tried to pass the murder off as the type of stranger danger trick-or-treat killing the media goes ape penis over. In terms of actual strangers, there was also a dentist in the 50s who passed out candy-coated laxatives to trick-or-treaters and made 30 kids violently ill. But 2 cases in the past 70 years, and one of them funny, is hardly a crisis. Actually, one kid had irreparable damage, so it's not even funny. Oh, good, fun. But the point is, an entire industry of peanut butter panic and nougat nightmares and Skittles scaries and Hershey horrors and Tootsie terrors and stop me because I've run out. You're not going to? Okay, well, I'm done. I've run out. It's all been built around 2 isolated incidents, the most recent of which occurred over half a century ago. It's kind of interesting, you know, this symbiotic fear-drumming relationship between police stations putting out candy warnings, the local media picking it up, Facebook spreading it, and then national media putting out think pieces about this thing that doesn't exist. It's like all these pieces are trying for some reason to maintain this myth, for maintaining something, some kind of like a quo, a status where there's always a new super drug endangering your kids. Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Here's the evergreen end plate to ask you to like and subscribe. It's any day of the year where you are.